All right, it's another session of our new podcast.
Yeah,
We're
we have
so excited to have Matt Molineaux here. It's a big pleasure for me. So Matt is co-founder of Delegance, and I first met Matt back in 2012. We were both doing autonomy research, and I actually had found one of his papers first. He did some awesome work called Discover History, which is like causal explanations for things in when figuring out diagnosis for when autonomous systems fail.
interesting.
And this is like early 2010s, I think, or that this work was published.
I first published a Discover History paper in 2010.
Yeah, and so I read that as I was getting ready to go to grad school, and then we met, and, yeah, now we're, 15 years later starting a company. It's so exciting.
Amazing. So yeah, I mean, you've been in the AI field, before it was cool, I guess.
Yeah, so I've spent a bit more than 20 years, mostly defense contracting. I started back in 2003, and I got my PhD close to the time when Dustin did, actually, in 2017, because I was just working in the field and doing my PhD alongside for years. But
Mhm.
Uh, a lot of the things that I have done have been about autonomous agents. Agentic AI isn't really new. It's just kind of being rediscovered, I think.
Mhm.
And autonomous agents that act in environments like video games at first was a thing that we did. Warcraft 2 was one of the early domains that I worked on agents in.
Mhm.
And, I've made agents that play chess, that play Unreal Tournament,
Oh,
just a
nice.
whole different range of things, and having environments where you can act and get better at things has always been really interesting to me, to find things that can interact with us um, uh, on a really clear level, where they understand the consequences of their action, and that's really blown up a lot
Mhm.
with conversational AI. There are a lot more domains where an agent can understand the consequences of its actions because they can understand.
And when you were working on these agents, were they LLM based or this was like pre-LLM?
Yeah, very pre-LLM. So LLMs, I mean, I first learned about deep learning in, I think, 2016. That might be about right, and that was sort of a precursor technology to what we think of as LLMs now, or foundation models. And uh, you know, ChatGPT. Does anybody know when ChatGPT came out? It feels like a COVID thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't really tell, right? It's like,
Like the before times,
Yeah.
yeah,
before ChatGPT.
yeah.
When was it?
I think end of
2022?
2022.
Okay.
Yeah,
When it hit the first public release?
I think that was the first open to the public. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
pretty big moment. What did that feel like for you? I mean, you've been in the industry for so long, and then suddenly the public is obsessed with AI seemingly overnight.
I gotta tell you, at first I hated it. Uh, so,
Common reaction.
well, to me, so I've worked for years on explainability stuff, and sort of neural networks, which is the technology which a lot of all LLMs are based on at some level, is fundamentally a technology that is black box.
Mhm.
And what worries me about that kind of technology is that it's not as governable, is a word that we use a lot these days, but it's harder for it to be transparent, or and I feel like we don't. Sorry, I'm not talking into the microphone as much. So uh, I have worked on technologies that are much more understandable,
Mhm.
and that a person can really explain their goals to and know that those goals are being followed.
Mhm.
And I really wanted that to be where
Mhm.
the first, you know, uh, really general and interesting AI that everybody, you know, wanted to use for everything came from. And I was really disappointed
Mhm.
that neural networks got there first.
Mhm.
And, over time, I have come to find lots of different ways where we can make these things work together, and sort of Um, I think we've come to understand better what the strengths and weaknesses of these different technologies are, and why maybe these things are good for language
Mhm.
and good for, I guess, very unstructured data.
Mhm.
Whereas I still want to use a lot of stuff that works with structured data, but it's more. It needs to be at a higher, more abstract level, and
Mhm.
abstraction is something that Dustin and I have worked on a lot in AI.
Nice. One of the things that we've talked about in the past, couple episodes is it's not, necessarily either or we've talked about,
Right.
world models and LLMs or deterministic and non-deterministic, and, um, that rather than just choosing, you know, one type of AI and going all in on that, that there's maybe synergies where the LLM is particularly suited for something, and then other types of AI is suited for something else, and then they can kind of work together to get the best of both worlds. Is that something you think is makes sense, or do you have a view there?
Absolutely. I really believe it. A world model fundamentally is a structured representation that is made uh, through interpretation. And interpretation is something that LLMs are much, much better at in terms of interpretation of structured data. And the human brain does a lot of this stuff. Our senses take unstructured data and make structured representations inside. At least that's what we kind of think is happening, right? And then there are parts of our minds, the conscious parts in particular, that I think are really good at manipulating these more structured things
Hmm,
and making creative use, uh, manipulating them in ways that are less, I want to say, so the word I want to use is inductive, and I don't know whether everybody's going to understand what I mean by that. So when we have things that learn through a lot of repetition, a lot of examples, then they sort of figure out what the median of something is. And you see when you use LLMs that they're going to tend toward, what lots of humans are doing.
mhm,
And this is good in being able to sort out these unstructured representations. But when you're working with a structured representation, like a world model,
mhm,
then you can extrapolate better. You
mhm,
can go outside the bounds of what is in what is most common, and you can start to make predictions. What would happen if we did something fundamentally different? And that's what science is about to a
interesting.
large extent. Is pushing the boundaries, figuring out, well, what haven't we tried yet, and you know technology, invention, all of this stuff. I think is sort of based on this ability to think. I mean, I guess outside the box is one way to put it, but um, to go beyond the boundaries of what is common.
Mhm.
And I think that the world models, the kind of goal reasoning that Dustin and I have worked on, they're good for doing that in a way that LLMs aren't necessarily.
Super interesting.
I mean, the way I feel about it is we didn't really have very general AI components before. In a
Mm.
sense, like we've been working on this for a long time. We've made really powerful systems, but in some ways they were always a little brittle. If there was a little mistake in a certain place, or it wasn't typed in a certain way, or you couldn't even have free form entry where you could kind of talk to it to or have a user ask a question. You might even have like structured parts of questions you could ask. Or if it did look like natural language behind the scenes, it was really like a bunch of hacks to get it to be structured.
Right.
So now we have this very general, it's much more flexible in general, because it's kind of learned these general patterns. But in some ways, that also you sometimes you want flexibility and generality, and sometimes you want proofs and guarantees. You wanna know that if you are about to deploy this to go achieve something, it's gonna do what you want, not
Right.
what you don't want. And so I think that's the thing is where and the other thing about this is that these generative AI models are trained from unstructured data, and that is really great for figuring out representations of the world, like, kind of, creating some kind of understanding, but then when you wanna go use it, right?
Uh-huh.
When you wanna act in the world,
Right.
which, by the way, a book is not the world.
It's not?
A c
It's my world. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, a co like a computer file system where you can run and execute code is also not the world.
Right.
And so the thing is that what all these people are what language is so good for, um, it's just not necessarily the same. You can't just, like, take that immediately and go use it to run agents in the world.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think about, how a lot of, programmers went into this line of business because, of all the complexities and nuance that goes with communicating with humans. Whereas the beauty of at least the way code used to work is, it is, entirely unambiguous what things mean, and
At least if you wrote it. If somebody else wrote it, then it might be very ambiguous.
it might be ambiguous, but to the compiler, it's unambiguous,
Yes.
right? Like, interpreting why did they write this code is ambiguous, but it is this subset of language where we've kind of defined it down to have this exact, action or result. Whereas when we're programming with an LLM, we don't have any idea with any kind of certainty what that result is going to be. And the all the complexities of dealing with human beings, which is there's misunderstandings, there's nuance, and semantic meaning is inherently open-ended. So, like, we see this, for example, with prompt injection, where people try to filter it, and then there's just a way to rephrase it or re-encode the meaning in a different way, and it's hard to constrain that entire space. Or situations where the AI uh, uh, will achieve the benchmark by, hacking the machine and faking the result or something like that, where now you're dealing with English, you're dealing with meaning, and you're saying, "Accomplish this goal," and you have to then think about, well, how is that gonna be interpreted? And there's many ways it can be interpreted. So it's both the kind of greatest strength is that it has this open-endedness to it, where it's general and you don't have to know in advance, like some big, if branch tree for every possible thing that can happen. But on the other hand, we introduce this kind of unpredictability into the system at the same time.
I'll say it's just been wild to the last few years coding, especially coding a production system that touches users. When you have to have a function call that is non-deterministic, oh my god. I mean, and by what I mean by that is whenever you call an LLM API. So it's in some ways it's gotten better, and there's these tools to, like, refine prompts, and you can try setting temperature equals to 0, but I actually caught one of the it was driving me nuts. I actually was kind of even getting blamed for something not working, but it was like a rare bug that was happening. It would only happen, honestly, like, it only happened every couple weeks or something, and I was sure that I was literally running evals, everything, and I was sure that the model provider was doing something funny.
Right.
Temperature was 0, and, temperature being 0 is not a guarantee that you're gonna get the same thing, but most of the time it would work, and that's kind of one of the best controls you had if you're not running the model yourself, or you can't, like, set other parameters. So, but anyway, one day I finally got hard proof. I got, like, hard traces of calling this model provider with the same thing and getting different answers back.
Interesting.
And I was mostly happy because I was, like, going insane. I was like, I
Right. I mean, I've been seeing this a lot on X recently, and I feel like I've been seeing it over the last few months, but it seems like it's kind of increasing in intensity, where people are convinced that Anthropic, um, dumbed down the model or they quantized it, and Opus 4.6 isn't the way it used to be a month ago. It's not as smart. maybe they need more compute for Mythos or whatever. I've seen similar accusations. A lot of times when new models drop, whether from OpenAI or Anthropic, there's like this kind of honeymoon phase where everybody's mind is blown, and then people insist they dumbed it down. And it's really hard to know what if is that happening or is that some kind of human hallucination? And another wild card factor, at least I found in my own coding, is like even if the model's exactly the same, the way I approach the model in a coding session might be different if my mood is different. So the language I use, the words I input into the machine are going to change based upon how I change. And that's another kind of non-deterministic factor. So how much of this is people are, um, got a good result, then they got frustrated, then they get in a bad mood, then they start, like, yelling at their AI, then their AI starts spinning out, or how much is it that Anthropic is actually doing this or some combination of the both? And, like, it's another example of how the open-endedness and the non-determinism creates a lot of confusion about what the system's actually doing.
I have a hypothesis here. You mind if I talk
Please
for a
jump
minute?
in. Yeah, yeah.
Um, so every time you retrain a model, uh, you are fundamentally getting a different hypothesis about a connection between language and meaning.
Hmm.
And I think that each of us, each person you know, has a model of some kind
Mhm.
in their minds that is connecting language to meaning. But we don't all have the same one. And that's what creates gulfs in communication, in part. There's probably more to it than that.
Mhm.
Um, but uh, when that shifts, it's fundamentally like you're talking to a different person to the extent that we anthropomorphize
Mhm.
these tools like Claude.
Mhm.
Uh, we think of it as being reliable. Like we make a relationship with it, and
Mhm.
when they introduce a new model, really, it's like somebody went through a fundamental change. They're not the same person
Right.
they were before.
Mhm.
And, it's going to be fascinating at first. Oh, well, uh, you seem to have gone away and learned all this new stuff.
Right.
But as you talk with them more, you're gonna say, well, I miss things.
Yes. Yeah.
And uh it is I mean, you can go too far in anthropomorphizing this stuff. Uh but I don't actually think it's necessarily the wrong thing to do because LLMs are like humans in a
Mhm.
lot of important ways, in the way we process meaning and we share meaning with one another. And so thinking of it as, another person with a viewpoint is correct, I think.
Mhm.
That there is a viewpoint inherent in the way we process language.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, linguists, I think, talk about something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, right? Where the the words you have access to, the language you have, influences how you think.
Mm.
And the I think that we're seeing that with these agents, and that regardless of how much Anthropic is doing to put something on top of the model that makes it easier for people to use and changes how it works. When they retrain the model, they don't have the power
Mhm.
to ensure that it's going to give the same experience because it already thinks differently every time you retrain it.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I've heard certain people refer to it as like growing a model. Like there's almost like this
hmm
organic process to it. And
It has the complexity of an organic process, and it has the I want to say epiphenomenality.
Mhm.
I don't know whether the word epiphenomenon is particularly recognizable, but
Great word.
people know about fractals and stuff like that. How you get emergent properties from something that grows from little bits, and uh, I think that's the organicness that we're talking about
Mhm.
there. That it is sufficiently complex in its small rules that the whole picture is unpredictable. It looks very different.
And we can't I mean, at least this is what I've heard from other people that, if you try to go in its brain and look at the weights and understand like how it's doing what it's doing or the specific models or logical constructions, like it's not totally transparent to us either. And that would also kind of, I think, maybe contribute to that sense of that it's something that's grown or it's something that
Mhm,
we can't fully predict how it's going to behave.
mhm.
To your point about personalities, I think this happened with 4.0 where it was like
Yeah, this was a
particularly
big deal for a lot of people. They were very emotionally, I think, upset that
it was very sycophantic and people got really attached to it. And then I think some of the open AI engineers were saying like 4.0 was a mistake. It's like creating all this AI psychosis. Like we never should have put it out there. And then they added a new one and they got rid of 4.0 and then all the 4.0 people freaked out and they added it back. But it is like whether you whether you anthropomorphize it or not, or whether you think of it as, alive or not, it feels to it creates an illusion of an other that has a personality that you develop a relationship with. And if suddenly that personality shifts or its brain changes and you're used to relating to it, it can be very jarring. And I think this is why I'm really bullish on open weight models because I want to have a model where I don't have to wonder, like, did it change? Right? It changes when
Right.
I decide it changes. And I get to choose the weights or fine tune them or switch the model when I want. And nobody can tell me, "Oh, you shouldn't use 4.0 anymore because it's bad for you," or whatever. If I like the way it's relating, it stays that way until I decide to change it.
And I think, I mean, there are a lot of problems with, at this stage, we're still very early on in understanding how people will use conversational AI over the long term. And uh, I think that one of the problems with having a lot of it controlled by these private companies at the moment
Mhm.
is, you know, there's a lack of transparency. There's a lack of understanding of what is part of the trained model and what isn't. And there's a lack of security fundamentally in that if you want the good performance, you have to give up the certainty that it's in your sphere of control where the information is going.
Mhm.
And so I think that over the long term, open models, local models will become the norm.
Mhm.
Uh, it's just we have not gotten to the point where that is efficient enough or, um, I guess, really, really practical. But it seems like everybody wants that, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, as we get more dependent on these systems and we put more and more private and intimate information in them, um, it's really across at least those 2 dimensions, right? That it's like, if I'm using this thing as my therapist, I don't exactly want everybody to know that. Or even as a lawyer, like I saw, people use ChatGPT as a lawyer, and then all of those conversations are subject to discovery in court because there's no attorney-client privilege. And
talk
so
about a backfire. Oh my god.
and you've
Can I
exp
do this? No, it's illegal. Can I do this? No, it's illegal. And then it's like, okay, so what and then, if you don't follow the AI and you do something else, and then they might be able to say you knew it was illegal. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
or all these ways of interpreting the intention of the contract or the circumstance or your motivation or everything else is now available, in litigation. I mean, there's just countless examples of this. And so I think for that reason, there's going to be a big desire, whether for individuals or businesses that want to have control over their data. Um, but then the other thing about kind of I think anything that we grow really dependent on there's a natural desire to have control over it.
Yeah.
Because you just feel vulnerable where you're like, if this thing was taken away all of a sudden, like, you know, I'm lost in the world. Imagine after 10 and 20 years of us using AI every single day, and then all of a sudden it's taken away from you. Like your ability to work in the economy, or who knows what kind of downstream impacts that would have. So I think as it becomes something that is so essential to human life, humans want to have control and possession and ownership of something that is so essential to how they live.
And rights. I mean, an editor friend of mine, Catherine Forrest, was recently posting about how there are court cases right now about what is copyrightable if you work with uh, an LLM to generate content. And it really matters, I think, how you're doing it, right? If you ask it to write something and you put that out, then it's definitely not copyrightable, I guess.
Mm.
If you write something and ask it to revise it, yeah, that's copyrightable. If you you ask it to write something and then you edit it, then your modifications are
Interesting.
copyrightable, right? So uh I think people don't understand their rights with respect to it.
Hmm.
And I think that I mean, I don't know what the right answer is, what these things should do in the future, but fundamentally to me, it feels like people are using it as a tool and they expect that if they do something with it,
Hmm.
they they put their credibility behind it, they
Hmm.
should be able to treat it as theirs.
Sure.
And I think there's a strong argument there. I also think that people shouldn't just put things out from an LLM without reading and considering whether they really believe them, which a lot of people are doing right now, and it's problematic.
Yeah.
But uh, if somebody is willing to stand behind something and nobody else, bothered to take the time to decide what it should be, I mean, that is a product of them. Uh,
I mean, it's the verifier step, right? So even like the way these things are trained,
yeah,
or or at least in post training and other things, there is this notion of the verifier. Like you need some end thing, human, something, some function to say this is success, or this is true, or this is useful, and this is not. Because with these things, you can generate infinite amount of copy and text and marketing and all of that. So even if it is just simply you choosing this one out of 5 or 10 or 100 or 1,000 samples that's generated, that alone is a very in some ways, that's the most valuable special capability, because, like, fundamentally, it cannot do that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to dig into the case law on this a little bit because it makes me think about other examples. Like if I take a paintbrush and I create like a machine where it just spins around, and I'm trying to create some kind of like Jackson Pollock thing, which is like streaks
Mhm.
of paint, right? And I just hit the go button and it does that and I hit stop. Is that not copyrightable art because I used a machine to spin a bunch of paint around?
and does it matter who created the machine? And
I
uh,
think it's, if I had to say, I think it's you pressing the stop button when you decided to press the
yeah.
stop button, and you deciding whether or not to even take it and do anything else with it.
Right, and but how is that any different than an LLM? Because I put the prompt in, right? I may
Mhm,
have a few back and forth, decide, like, when it's done,
mhm,
and so where does the line come in
right.
if we think about using tools or automation or machines or robots assisting in the process of creating something? Um, where do we draw that line? Because in a way, it's almost as if people are kind of mythologizing the LLM, like, it's just this, like, magical AI box, and so the normal rules don't apply.
Someone should name a new LM Mythos, mythical myth,
Yeah, that would
something
be
myth
a good
based.
I know
name,
that is
right?
mythical AI box right there. No editing necessary.
Yeah,
Just the
yeah.
full thing,
Maybe
but
like operating system plus myth. So there's something there, I think. Yeah.
right, exactly. Yeah, but, or, like, I think William S. Burroughs in Naked Lunch, there was something where he, like, cut up a bunch of pages of something and, like, randomly rearranged them.
Mhm,
Is that not copyrightable? I mean, that seems like a very artistic
mhm.
expression. So, um, yeah, I'm curious on in these copyright cases, um, how these nuances are getting adjudicated and where the judges are drawing the line, and if there is principled, informed, reasons, or if it's kind of the early state of the law here, and by the
Mhm.
time it hits the Supreme Court or, higher courts, that maybe they're gonna come to a different conclusion about this.
I would suspect that it would change over time, but I am really not an expert on the law, and I'm just, talking half-assed about something that you know, I read online that, was filtered to a friend of mine. But,
Well, that's what we're all about here.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Uh, uh, but yeah, I think that it's really interesting, and it's important where these rates decisions land. Uh, and that process is always messy, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's another big, legal I love to nerd out on legal stuff because I used to be a lawyer. So, there's a case I mean, there's all these, lawsuits, oftentimes very tragic circumstances where a teenager commits suicide after talking to a chatbot or these kinds of things, and so these companies are getting sued left and right. And one of the arguments that is being mounted in court is that the LLM speech is protected under the First Amendment. And what's interesting there is not because at first it sounds like, oh, the AI has First Amendment rights to speak, which is a little dubious. But that's not actually the argument. The argument is that the First Amendment also protects the right to hear speech. The listener
Oh,
has First Amendment protection. So if there's speech in the marketplace, however it was produced, if I want to hear it and the government is getting in the way of that, that's a violation of my First Amendment
Mhm.
right. And so they are situating this in that theory where they're saying the person who wants to hear the chatbot, they have a right to that. And you could imagine kind of what the consequences might be if the case law goes the other way, if the government has the power to pass a law that says what your chatbot is allowed to say or not allowed to say. I mean, first there's like the technical problem of
sure.
no one really knows how to implement that, but also we're going to get these ridiculous laws where it's going to be like, your AI is not allowed to tell you that this policy or this politician makes sense, or every politician in the world is going to want to get their fingers in there and say, for safety or for the children, the AI has to say this or it can never say this. And that to me seems like at least in violation of the spirit of the First Amendment, that when we think about the marketplace of ideas and freedom of thought, that it kind of seems inappropriate for the state to be dictating that. But I think that's another place to watch to see how the law plays out with these issues.
I mean, one thing I feel about this is, this is kind of early technology. It's very powerful, but there's been a lot of hype. I mean, you have to generate. I mean, if you want to get the word out there and get people excited, you've got to hype things up, and at the same time, uh, it's early technology. It's new technology. There's inherent, limits on it, and so I there is the disclaimer, right, that, like, it can make mistakes. Maybe that should be elaborated on. Um, yeah, it's kind of just a delicate thing, and I also just wonder, like, where personal responsibility comes into this. I guess
Right.
is this mostly an issue because of people who are under 18?
I think that is where the majority of the issue is right now, and I think that's at least the strongest case you could make is to say, minors, don't have access to the full spectrum of rights, although there is case about, um, minors do have First Amendment protection to some extent. But I think, if it only applies to minors, the impact on the broader underlying policy concerns of the First Amendment are not as impacted as if it applied to everyone.
Okay.
So, yeah, but I think all these different nuances and distinctions are gonna play themselves out in the courts to see where they draw the line. Um, but yeah, there's gonna be, another situation could be, what if somebody uses an AI to hack into something or build a virus or whatever? Like, should the company that created it be responsible? And this kind of relates to what we were alluding to before, Mythos.
Yeah.
So Mythos is the new Anthropic model that apparently is too dangerous to release to the public, and uh, people are accusing Anthropic of overhyping,
Yeah.
and some
Yeah.
people are saying, "Hey, I took an open weight model or open source and I pointed it at the same code base and I found all these 0 days and I didn't need Mythos to do it." Um, but on the other hand, like, the benchmarks that they're publishing do seem like a step function up from before. So, can we discount it completely? I'm just kind of curious what you guys think. Like, is it real? Is it overhyped?
I mean, the funny thing is, yeah, I'm just thinking about this right now, but did they have to announce it the way they did? Like, what if in an alternate timeline, they just didn't say anything publicly about Mythos? They still had the private meetings with all the top companies, let them know, almost like the way you would disclose any kind of security issue,
Right.
right? And maybe they're like, well, not only did we find these, we actually built a system we think will find even more or could run it. And they could just be offering that as a private service or all those. So, you got to wonder why make all the buzz around just telling everybody, you're not going to release it to them. So it's not like you're, or maybe this is right. But these days, right? Isn't it all about going viral? Like anything you can go do to go viral. And that alone, I think, is why we've talked about like doom and like p doom and like AI and fear of the future that somebody I wonder that you read a new headline about you know when things are going to get bad, like there's all these predictions about specific years, or you hear all this stuff. I wonder if that's just so engaging. I mean, you see this anything that kind of baits you to have like fear or anger. This is what the social media algorithms are using to like
Totally.
keep you scrolling and keep you engaged. So I almost wonder if it's just trying to get like that's the new marketing. Like you just marketing via getting your audience to feel negative emotions is tempting, or at least seems to have initial high metrics, which you can then show and be like, "Hey, it's working. We're getting more attention and more people are talking about our company and can use our product." And
Yeah. I guess that's just the way business is done these days,
yeah,
get people
kind of
really
hope there's an
upset
alternative.
and cash in.
I think there's maybe another thing on it. Just Anthropic recently has had all the press about, not wanting the US to use their stuff for war, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So they have clearly some kind of desire to appear ethical. And that may well be based on a desire to be ethical at some level. And, any business is just so many moving pieces that often get out of sync with one another that it's quite possible that the people who want to be ethical and who want to appear ethical are different people. Uh, uh, and uh, so it makes me think that this is messaging not just that they are, um, I mean, dangerous sounds like power, and I think we're focusing on this idea. Are they trying to sound powerful? I'm thinking, what if they're trying to sound ethical? What if they're
Mm.
trying to sound like they care where the other guys don't?
Mhm.
I'm not entirely certain that a business at a certain size can care,
Right.
but uh,
You're just so at the whims of
you
the
know,
market
they're
and
they're definitely virtue signaling at some level. I think,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's important. And you know, I think I wish other companies would virtue signal more, if only because it creates an incentive not to be total assets all the time.
Right. Yeah. Even if you're not doing it for the right reasons, as long as
Yeah.
arrive there, it doesn't really matter, how you got there. If there is, I mean, if we're in a world where the most profitable thing is to do the most ethical thing, I think that would be a pretty nice place to end up, even if the motives aren't pure. But yeah, I think that's kind of been Anthropic's shtick from the very beginning, when they broke off from OpenAI, is they're kind of the more ethical, more, conscientious. That's how they've been trying to define themselves, and define their brand. But there's a dark side to that as well, which is, um, they're constantly pushing centralized control. We
Hmm.
need more regulations. The government needs to. It's kind of funny because on the one hand, they're saying we better not sell this stuff to the Pentagon. On the other hand, hey, the government better take over everything, or the world's going to end. So, which one is it exactly? I'm not sure, but um,
Whenever anybody says ethical or even governance, and I'm hearing a lot of conversations about AI governance, I have to wonder whose ethic,
right,
right?
yeah,
Because it matters a lot. I've been doing work on human alignment and ethics over the last few years, and one of the ways in my research we approach this is to say, okay, I'm going to take a person and look at their individual preferences and try to make the same decision that person would, because that person is at least somewhat consistent, right? Whereas if I want to look at humanity's ethics, they're all over the place, right?
sure,
So is it the ethics of, making money for your stockholders, which is what, you know, a lot of businesses even, say that out loud. It's not even the quiet part at all.
right,
And or is it the ethics of freedom and uh, to do what you want with your data, your rights to the right to privacy, uh, right uh, to use the things that you've purchased when we talk about software rights and stuff like that, and uh, different people clearly. I mean, so a person's right to use the music that they purchased is clearly bumping up against the company's right to charge for the music they own, right?
totally,
Whose right wins in these situations? There isn't actually a clear ethical answer, and just saying that something is ethical doesn't actually mean that you agree with it or it's in your best interests.
right, 100%. And I mean, there's the category of people where they're not thinking about ethics at all, and, it's cynical, or if they talk about it, it's disingenuous, they're pretending to care about it, but they don't. There's, like, that bucket of people. Then there's the bucket of people who genuinely do care or are trying to think about what's ethical, but within that bucket, like you're saying, that doesn't mean that that person's ethics is your ethics.
Right,
And there's that saying, the road to hell is paved in good intentions. Good intentions aren't enough.
right.
It's not enough for Anthropic or whoever to say, we want to do the right thing. There's no guarantee that something really bad isn't going to come out of their desire to do what's good. And so, and oftentimes in these safety arguments, that's what we see, right? So, like after September 11th, the Patriot Act is put in, and, you could say one group of people who tried to do that maybe were cynical, they just want more power, they don't really think it, is for safety or whatever. And then there's another bucket of, national security people that are genuinely concerned about terrorism and the safety of the American public. And in the name of safety, we could easily lose all of our rights and have a totalitarian state. And somebody could make a very powerful ethical argument for it to say, these freedoms are putting us in danger and we have to, get rid of them for the greater good. And they might really believe that, and maybe they might be right. So, that is kind of at play with this stuff. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tristan Harris. He's been he was one of the people in I think he worked at Facebook, and he was in this social network documentary, and kind of a very powerful voice about how social media is used to monetize people's attention, and um, that there was some unethical uses of it without even trying to be ethical. Uh, but now he's sort of pivoted to AI, and he has this organization, and he goes around. He's like was in the AI documentary, and I heard recently about a talk he gave because he's kind of like a celebrity in some circles, and he's giving and he has these very dire predictions about AI. Even in this AI documentary, the documentarian was asking him like, "Are you gonna have kids? Like, should people have kids?" And he was like, "I don't know, the world's gonna end in 10 years," like, really extreme,
Oh my
right?
god.
And people what I heard is he was giving this talk, and people in the audience are crying and getting really upset and in deep despair because they believe what he's saying. And then he's telling these people, "That's how you should feel." And it's they're literally have this campaign they're gonna put all these billboards up and all of this stuff, like the kinda anti-smoking campaigns, but it's gonna be like an AI thing to shock people, make people upset, make people afraid. And of course, the solution that they're prescribing is, call your senator and, get the government to do something about it. To the point that I almost wonder if he's like an intelligence operative that's like trying to corral everybody into this, but like I think that is really scary to me when there are people out there who want people to be in despair because and not to have hope because I think that's incredibly disempowering and it literally causes people to give their power away when they're in that state.
Yeah, you literally cannot make good decisions.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you I mean, do you whenever you do something when you're angry or you're afraid, in the long run, if you look back, that decision ends up not being a very good decision, right? A lot of
Absolutely.
times people make decisions to, I don't know, stay at their job or stay in a bad relationship out of fear, and then, you know, later they look back and they absolutely feel so.
Right.
And it's also like you have you ever done that exercise where, you, like, count how many circles you can see in the room?
No.
So
That
there's this
sounds fun.
exercise where if you could take wherever you are now, you could take 30 seconds and look around the room and count how many circles, and what you'll notice is there's so many other things you did not see.
Huh.
So what you're thinking and what you're feeling colors your whole experience and all of your work and ends up being what you produce. So it's where you get into this self-fulfilling prophecy, and this is why, healthy habits and meditation and I mean, talk about getting out of AI psychosis, like, you gotta step back and clear your mind, clear your emotions,
Right.
uh, especially now more than ever, because especially now we're in a world where information and perspective is the battleground. Like, I hate, and maybe it's been like this for a while, but it's even more so, and it's not even us, it's the agents, right? I mean, it's not even SEO anymore, it's AEO. It's like, how if people are going to ChatGPT, how are they talking about your product? So now
Right.
we're just living in this massive, like, weighted cloud of, like, information, uh, information agendas, and so it's so hard to think clearly,
Mhm.
and I've been saying this last couple episodes, I feel like going on certain websites or social platforms is just straight up adversarial.
Right.
Like, I wanna surround myself with what I'm calling the agentic aura, which is like, I want all information filtered through my own local, to use your term, fiduciary agents,
Right.
that are like, for me, to help me have more clarity and help me have like happier state of mind, more relaxed state of mind, because then I'm more powerful. I can achieve more, I'm more efficient, and also life is just better. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really true. Like, when you log onto the internet or social media, you're immediately subject to countless psychological operation campaigns, quite literally, you know, whether it's by intelligence agencies, private actors, individuals, um,
Businesses.
bots, businesses, advertising, tracking,
Yeah.
all of it, it's all trying to control your mind, get you to do something, get you to think
Mm.
something. And it is highly adversarial. And I think that's one of the big reasons where you get a weird feeling when you're done logging off. You
yeah.
know, you don't feel good, or you kind of feel on some level that your mind just got, like, extracted or manipulated, and you don't feel whole, you don't feel connected to your humanity and other people's humanity. You A lot of times people feel depressed or in a bad mood or, you know, all of these things.
I don't think it's new in the sense that for thousands of years, people have been using narratives and trying to control people through fear, through being able to influence what they believe. Um, Not trying to get too controversial, but certainly there are some religions which have been exploited, at the very least, to attempt to control and gain power quite successfully. And authoritarian governments. Uh, I think that what has changed is the ability to craft a message and deploy it much more effectively in the past because people are all kind of looking at the same places.
Mhm.
And it's always really important, I think, to look at the incentives. So for OpenAI and Anthropic, they have an incentive to get you to use their tools. So if they tell you that something is governable and everybody seems to actually think this is possible at the moment, um, it's because they want you to believe that it's governable, so you'll use it. My my point of view, it's a black box. You don't know what its motivation is. There is no way for most, for any LLM to be governable. It's total snake oil. At the same time, if you don't give it power, then it can't do something to you. I mean, you interact with people all the time. You don't govern the people you interact with.
Right.
I don't know why you expect to be able to govern the LLM. Uh, but I'm not saying don't use it, and I'm not saying be scared of it because you know you don't give you don't give out your social security number and your credit card number to everybody because you're willing to trust them with a certain amount of power over you. Don't give the LLM power over you. Certainly, I mean, if anybody out there is putting an LLM in charge of missiles or nuclear codes, I have a big beef with them. But the fault is not the LLM. I used to have a boss who liked to say, if the king gives a sword to a monkey and the monkey stabs him, it's not the monkey's fault.
Right.
Um, and so anyway, we have extreme people who are saying, oh, this AI is great. Trust everything. And people are over trusting. We have other people who are saying AI is terrible. Don't use it at all. Take it completely out of your life. They have incentives too. There are also people out there who are under trusting. And, years worth of media that focuses more on evil AI like the Terminator rather than good AI like Data from Star Trek
Hmm.
uh, tends to bias people. And I've always thought that it's all in how you use it. But
Mhm.
pay attention to, if you see an extreme narrative, then somebody's got an extreme incentive. And I don't know, fear mongering on fear mongering is, a thing on one side, but the seductive promise of new technology is kind of the opposite to me, right?
Mhm.
Where everybody says, I'm going to use LLMs for everything. I'm going to write my emails to my friends with LLMs. I mean, you don't need to do that. Uh,
Guess it
it's
depends
They
on
they
your
might
not
friends.
stop
really
being your
saving you
friends.
time. Do you really want to save time talking to your friends? I don't know.
Right.
Uh,
Get back to vibe coding.
That's right, that's right.
which is disappointing in some ways because we love working with these really explicit, non-ambiguous languages, right? I say, and I don't think that all work with Claude Code is vibe coding. But I I am disappointed that in order to be efficient, I have to use it these days in some ways. But I'm also elated that I am incredibly productive, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, there are downsides, but
Yeah. I mean, I just worry about, like, how when people talk about, "Oh, we're worried about not being able to govern the AI," that in some ways that's a cipher for we're worried about not being able to govern the individual. You know,
Oh,
that
interesting.
they're
yeah,
actually, wanna control humans, and if we give these AIs to humans and we can't control the AI, then we can't control the humans. And so we need to have these guardrails and it needs to be centralized and, only the big tech companies can get Mythos and, the plebs we couldn't give it to the plebs because imagine what they would do. And behind all of this is this institutional bias, whether it's the government needs to take over or the big tech companies need to take over. But none of these voices are saying, actually, what we need to do is push the power to the individual, and the institutions are the danger. Centralization is the danger. That is a perspective that is underrepresented. I saw this new AI doc, which is a really good documentary. I recommend seeing it. And they had this very wide range of perspectives from the extreme pessimists, the extreme optimists, people in the middle, but nobody had the viewpoint of the danger is actually centralization and we have to push this to the individual. We have to decentralize it. That wasn't represented at all, which I thought was very surprising.
the people with the money, their viewpoints are the ones that are getting heard, right? The danger of centralization, I think, is kind of the concern of the little guy who isn't well organized enough, and it doesn't fit, the contrary viewpoints of any of the people with the big money, so they just don't talk about it.
Right. Or they make it seem really dangerous. They're like, "That's the last thing we would ever wanna
Yeah,
do,"
Right.
yeah.
is let the individual get access to this, and it kinda reminds me of maybe what or makes me think about maybe what it would have felt like, when the Gutenberg printing press was first invented, and all the translations of the Bible were in Latin. And, Tinsdale had the one of the first translations of the Bible in, English. And that is still, one of the most influential works in the English language,
Mhm.
but he was burned at the stake for that. And, a lot of the arguments from the church was, um, only the elite should be able to have direct access to this, and it's harmful for the average person to interpret it themselves. They're gonna get all these bad ideas, the devil's gonna get in their head, and it should all be mediated through the church to kinda deliver the safe, proper interpretation of the text. And in a lot of the debates today seem kind of like the same dynamic, just dressed up in new clothing.
You know what I feel like this is? We're not giving humans enough credit. I remember kind of from a very early age when you start to get a bigger perspective of the world, I just felt like it's so amazing how almost everyone on the planet, like, gets along. I obviously, I that might sound very naive. Of course, there's all these conflicts. There's a in some ways, peace is very fragile, and there's always but at the same time, it's incredible what we have on the planet. Like, the fact that, you walk into a grocery store and you see, like, the diversity of high quality goods, and you walk into, like, other like, in some ways, I mean, there's a lot of improvements to make, but I don't think people give the individual enough credit on the whole across all of humanity, and
I would actually go a little further. I would say that at least 99% of conflict is driven by centralized power dynamics. Even if you go down to people who are arguing about their sports team, right? There's a
Hmm.
centralized power behind each of the different teams that is motivating them. That the things that are motivating them are not their problems themselves. I mean, occasionally people have problems with their neighbors, fences being in the wrong place or something like that is the archetypal example.
Right.
But they don't go to war. The only people who go to war are governments, and it's not, you know, all the major source of conflict in the world is I don't have enough power. I want the power that guy has as well. And, yeah, I agree. Individuals are not the source of the problem. They never have been. It's the people who, you know, they try to suck up all the power from the individuals so that they can uh be the vast determiners.
just one more thing there is, if you've looked into Bitcoin, Bitcoin has a very long-term view, right? I mean, literally in the white paper, it says the year 2140 is when the last thing will be mined. I mean, to build something and then have it, you've set a date that's like 150 years in the or like 120, 30 years in the future
Right.
is like wild long-term thinking. There's an organization here in San Francisco. It's a really cool bar if you want to go to the interval, but it's run by the Long Now Foundation, and I don't know
Sure.
too much about them, but I've been there a couple. It's a really cool spot if you haven't been there. But their whole thing is, how do we get humanity to think on such long timescales, like the next 1,000 years, 10,000 years? And I just see, if you want robust systems, decentralized is so much better. And we mentioned this before, but like, we take for granted all the decentralized systems in our life, right?
Mhm.
Like, you're like, literally, local and state governments is a form of decentralization. Your family and your house, like, it's not like everyone in the whole country lives in one building, right? It's very decentralized, like, and so all of that makes for very resilient systems. And so I think, if we want to build, a future that is better for everyone, that works for more people, just decentralization in general is the goal.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I love the point you made about all the human goodness that's happening every single day, every single moment. When you think about all the cooperation that's happening all the time that is making the world go round.
It's all invisible, no one talks about it. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
dude, this would not exist. We couldn't be here. We wouldn't have to say, like, the amount of cooperation that happens in we just lost the light, I think.
Yeah.
It got a little dark here as we're talking about positive.
I know, we're trying to raise the light, but
Yeah, yeah. But, it's just, I feel like it's almost like a miracle. I think it's not that it's something obviously is going on where 99.9% of, like, people and individuals are good, and they want outcomes that work for not only themselves, but other people around them. And I think, if that wasn't the case, maybe none of this would exist. Like, we wouldn't
oh,
even be
yeah,
here.
there's no way, you know? And then, I mean, how many people not only are cooperating, how many people are sacrificing for somebody else every day, for somebody they love, somebody they care about, right? That's happening all the time. But that's not what we hear about in the news, and people get so cynical about human nature. Humans are bad. And a lot of it, I think, comes from looking at an individual's inability to solve something that they have no ability to solve on their own. So people will say, you know, no one cares about climate change, so people are bad. Or, racism exists, so, you're a bad person because you haven't solved racism, or you haven't solved climate change, or you're not doing enough to battle these like incredibly complicated problems that nobody has a great answer for, and there's no easy solutions. And meanwhile, somebody's got their hands full just getting through the day and meeting their immediate responsibilities. But then we blame that individual somehow for climate change or for, all the social problems. It's this bad individual doesn't care enough, isn't doing enough. And that also reminds me of um, tactics that have been used in religion where it's like, you're bad for being human, you're sinful, you're bad, and that is why you have to give me the power over you because you're no good. And it's a similar thing, with this rhetoric about humanity is bad, the individual is bad, and therefore we need to take that power from the individual because they're not using it correctly. When so often the opposite is true, the individual is fine. Like you were saying, it's these institutions or these large organizations or these groups where things start to break down. And even then, you can't even necessarily blame the individual because there are all these people in a corporation or in a government, and there's incentives and there's structure. And there's no one person that you can point to and say it's their fault. They're the bad guy. They made the right decision. They made the wrong decision. A lot of it is just about system structure. But we want to we love to find that bad guy. We want the villain. We want somebody to blame. We want to say it was their fault. They did the wrong thing for the wrong reason. And the more nuanced perspective where it's kind of um, more about oftentimes the difficulty of the underlying problem. Like I think a lot of times people think that you know, there's somebody who, when it comes to income inequality or climate change or any of these big issues, AI, social media, there's somebody who has access to some lever where they could just make everything good, and they're just choosing not to pull the lever. But, like, I think usually when you, like, kind of unpeel what's going on, there's these crazy trade-offs and risks and uncertainties, and it's like, this lever has these risks, and this one has these risks, and it's not because someone is, like, some evil person saying, "I'm gonna pull the give me all the money lever and kill everybody." It's like they're kind of overmatched by the difficulty and complexity of the problem, and I'm not saying that's always the case, but it's kind of like that saying where it's like never attribute, like malice to what you could attribute ignorance to,
Or incompetence or yeah.
incompetence. But I think there's like an even further one, which is never attribute incompetence to when you can
Mhm.
attribute the difficulty of the underlying problem.
Well, so this makes me almost more hopeful than ever and a reason to be optimistic about the future, because if it is difficult problems and building systems, then we are unlocking that with AI.
Right.
I mean, that's just a perspective. Like, if we were all more intelligent, maybe we get way better outcomes in the future that but again, no one seems to be talking in this way,
Right.
and so they don't it's like you haven't even identified the problem that you should be focused on solving. And then if you don't even know the problem or that causes the problem, you can't even see what it might look like if things were different. Um,
It's
I don't
really
know
interesting.
if
Mhm.
this is what you're talking about when you talk about the centralization problem, but I do wonder if simple uh, power distribution
Mhm.
is, you know, one of the major problems with humanity, and that, fundamentally, if power is distributed as evenly as possible, then, uh, you know, we have some theoretical minimum. I don't think it quite works because I think I'm describing anarchy. at the end. And not that anarchy is necessarily bad, but um, certainly uh, there is still violence that happens in anarchy. And but it feels like there is maybe uh, the technology could be a um, a, a force for even power redistribution,
Mhm.
which is fundamentally though at odds with any governmental structure, which is you know fundamentally about centralized power.
Yeah, I think there's really something to that, and, it's there's also a spectrum, right? Like, even within a government, like, let's say the US government, like, having the branches of government is a way of trying to distribute power. And in general, there's this problem of power, which is power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that doesn't mean that the person who's corrupted by it is a bad person, because anyone who has the weight of that power is probably not going to be able to bear it. The, I'm kind of a Lord of the Rings nerd. Do you guys know, Gandalf and that whole
I
thing?
mean, I'm a fan. I haven't gone too deep. I won't don't quiz me on it, but
Yeah, this is just an example I come back to a lot because I think it's a good analogy for this, which is, Gandalf, who is sort of one of the, like, beacons of integrity in the story. He's, like, one of the good guys, he's always, like, ethical, whatever. But when he puts the ring on, like, in the Fellowship of the Ring, that scene at the beginning or in the books where he's, like, sitting near the fireplace, he's putting the ring on, and he starts to get corrupted by it, and he needs to get rid of it.
you mean Frodo? Or you mean the Bilbo?
Well, no, Gandalf, there's
Oh
a
yeah,
moment where
that's
he's
right. You're
kind of
right.
like they don't realize that the ring's there, and
They don't know what it is yet,
they don't know what it
and
is
he's like,
yet, and he's kind of like in this weird daze, like staring into the fire and like, almost has to push himself. Or that also happens to Galadriel where she like puts it on and she's
mhm.
like, "Oh, what I would do," and whatever, and she has to like stop herself where it's like there's almost a power where if you were given enough power, no matter how good you are, it would mess you up. And so I think of that in the context of checks and balances or even something like Bitcoin, where it's like the power to create money is almost too much for the government to wield responsibly. And we almost have to like take that power away, not because the government's bad, but because that restores it to its goodness by not having the corrupting power. So that's another way of thinking about distributing power or decentralizing power or balance of power is um, that if we distribute it enough, then each person can kind of be responsible for the amount of power that they're given.
Right.
But if we concentrate it too much, it's very difficult for that to be wielded responsibly.
And that's sort of the ideal of democracy, which is, never really realized, right? Is that each citizen is really responsible for what's going on. And actually, it makes a better argument for the idea that everyone should vote uh, than I've heard in the past, because I've tended to think that if you don't want to vote, you probably shouldn't. Uh, but if, the more people who vote, the less concentrated the power is,
Mhm.
maybe, uh, that's really good if everybody could take responsibility.
And then I have cared a lot about voting, and I think not enough when people see outcomes of elections or other political things where they personally are not necessarily happy or a group isn't happy. I'm looking like okay, who all voted? Like, let's get at the what was the process? And if you look at the voting numbers, they're so low. And I wonder again, like I think it can be easy to maybe blame different groups or the individuals themselves, but what if fundamentally it is a like complexity and information issue? I mean, I never really felt I was not in politics or even in any kind of I didn't really study that a lot in school or like read a lot of that in my free time. I never felt fully up to speed on making a good decision or even what the looking at the evidence you can always easily hear what people say if you quickly look them up, but then to see, okay, well, what have they done in the past? There's so much information. So that's again why, like, if we all level up because of AI, and we implement mechanisms like, ranked choice voting looks very interesting, right? As
Mhm.
a mechanism to make it so that candidates aren't so against each other because they kind of share votes at the end if they don't the way that it works. So um, if we all level up with we are literally more intelligent, we can process more information more quickly. And we have better cryptography everywhere that makes it secure, and we can prove who we are without maybe revealing who we are. Then like, why can't we digitally vote? And I can chat with an AI to say, like, I want the candidates that most align with my values, what I personally value.
Right.
Like, could that maybe could fix a lot of things? But again, that's another potential promise of everyone having AI.
Right. And having their own AI, that is fiduciary, that is transparent, that is verifiable. Because otherwise, because like politicians always, or a lot of politicians lie or propaganda or whatever. So I would want an AI that can kind of like poke through the BS, you know, and tell me what's really going on. Look at their voting record. Look at who they're getting money from. Compare their rhetoric. Let's get to the ground truth. But if my AI is not allowed to tell me that because, for the children or whatever, it can't tell
Mhm.
me the truth, then we don't get that benefit.
This is actually something that Dustin and I are working on a bit right now. There's a lens system that we proposed recently. The idea being that, you collect evidence using uh, LLM technology, which is really good at interpreting and finding all that stuff, but you combine it using something that's not an LLM, that is something you own, that's on your machine,
Hmm,
that is using, specialized rubrics based on your values,
interesting.
um, to to determine, uh, what likely you should believe about whether this is something that's good for you. Do you think I'm describing that well,
Yeah,
Dustin?
I think absolutely. But it's very much grounded in like evidence ranking and then how much evidence and how well that evidence scores against a particular rubric, but that you have control over the rubric or can try different or other people can make rubrics.
And part of the reason why that will work is because while, gathering information is based on the LLM technology that's centralized, the ability to combine the information is distributed and localized to the individual.
Ah, so could you walk through like maybe an example to just kind of make it more concrete?
So I think of it in terms of doing something like consumer reports. So, say you're trying to figure out what car to buy, right? Not controversial. I mean, I suppose if I were in an auto conference, it would be. But anyway, so you need the LLM to go out and find the best information possible about, the miles per gallon, um, the safety record, the maintenance record of a bunch of car companies. Combine the information, find out what the best thing we have is about, this model line. If that model line's been around a while, and it's going to try to find sources that are uh, not marketing copy, right? That are coming from people generally who are, consumer watchdogs, stuff like that, right? Going to pull that in, and the LLM is gonna find and search down all that information, and then on your computer, you're going to access that archive of information. Say, okay, I've got all this evidence about what these things are. Then I am going to apply my rubric. So what I am most concerned about is energy efficiency, and I'm also going to want to know how long my repair times are going to be, or something like that. And so your local evidence-based reasoner is going to put together pro and con arguments for each of the different vehicles you could consider, saying,
Hmm,
this is the miles per gallon here. This is the you know, what your actual cost is. Maybe even bring in information about, what the energy, how do we say, what type of energy is available to your house, whether it's actually gas or solar or something else. And evaluate based on that, make those arguments up and tell you, scores based on what you want and your personal information as well as the information gathered from the web. These
Hmm.
arguments are fundamentally deductive. They are not uh they're not linguistic. They're
Mhm.
not using the LLM mechanism of, guess what the next word is, right?
Mhm.
They're
And
instead,
not even structured as a conversation even necessarily.
yeah, they're not necessarily structured as a conversation. They're structured as a list of pros and cons and an evaluative number, for example. And then, you have something that's very personalized, that is, you know, non bullshit.
Or at least you can configure
Yeah.
what you trust. So imagine you got all this evidence from all these sources,
Right.
but yet for whatever reason you distrust certain sources. You could just simply deselect those and see how it might change,
Uh-huh.
and that gives you more power too.
And so is there an LLM that is used at all for this part of the process?
No, not for the argumentation part.
Mhm.
It's only used for searching to find where the information is.
Ah,
It'll tell you what the source of it is, right?
uh-huh.
And it'll tell you, what the numbers are and that kind of thing. And it could hallucinate, and
Mhm.
we'll do things several times to make sure. But
Right.
you could generally rely on the LLM to provide you,
Mhm.
concrete data
Uh-huh.
more than you can to provide you an opinion, right?
I see.
And you can also, I mean, maybe you have reviewers out there that you can rely on. Maybe you trust Consumer Reports. Fine.
Right.
It's still not really individualized to you. They have different priorities than you do, right?
Sure.
And so this would be a way of accumulating that information and developing a personalized argument. It's not unbiased, but it's biased toward you, right?
Right.
And the bias is transparent.
Sure.
And yeah, I.
So the LLM gets the sources,
Mhm.
and then but there's some sort of qualitative evaluation of the content in the source or some scoring of it?
Yeah, well, we want to score the source in terms of, particular. I mean, it's going to be domain specific in a way. So, like, if if you're looking at cars, generally more miles per gallon is better
Mhm.
than less, right? Um, and so there is a there's a natural ordering to the data that allows
Uh-huh.
you to order that if it is a value. If it is, language,
Uh-huh.
then you do need to have a way to say, um, this says a specific, there is a specific logical representation of this information. And
Oh,
I
interesting.
can chain these facts together in a deductive reasoning chain to come up with a particular conclusion. You can do
Interesting.
that without,
Huh.
you know, the
Right.
LLM's hidden bias. Uh,
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, you're do you use the LLM to structure the data from the unstructured data? Because it
Yeah, you
sounds
do
like
have to uncover the structure using an LLM. N Nothing, no natural language techniques that I'm aware of uh, are strong enough to do that in general domain. Uh,
I see. So you're able to, you take some magazine article or whatever it
right.
found, and then you can extract out, let's say, hard numbers. You
Mhm.
can extract out logical arguments that are structured.
In fact, like, when, individual sentences, if it says, uh, "This car is, uh has been tested by the Automobile Mechanics Association," right? And you have a fact that is explicitly associated with that, that's being asserted, right? So you say that
Mhm.
according to this source,
Mhm.
uh, testing was performed here, and they're the people uh, who are providing numbers, right? So that fact, and if I want to construct an argument out of it,
Mhm.
I don't necessarily want to use the argument from the article. I want to use the facts from the article,
Mm.
and restructure the argument because I don't know if I can trust the way they have decided to put the information together.
Right.
Uh, and I want to check to see whether I've got the same facts from a few sources as well, and I want to check. Uh, you know, in some cases, like I don't want to trust Anthropic to tell me what's good about Claude. What I really want is to look at the source and see, does it do something that it claims it does, right? So that I can verify directly. Now, it's not open source, so I can't do that. And that is part of what makes it fundamentally less trustworthy
Mhm.
than an open source model. Open source models are fundamentally more transparent, and we should give them less trust.
Absolutely. And do you have is there like a symbolic language you use to structure an argument in a way that you can do that kind of like deterministic
Yeah, I mean, you can
analysis
use first
over?
order logic for it. There are a lot of logics that have been invented in the uh, the computer science literature.
Mhm.
One that's particularly popular right now. It's called answer set programming. So it's a. Have you ever heard of Prolog?
I've heard of it, yeah.
So
I've never
Prolog
used
is
it.
a declarative means of programming through logic. Um, Answer set programming is more powerful than it in some ways. It allows abductive inference, and it allows you to consider, I guess, the probabilities of various facts and put together uh, a an analysis. And there's great tools for searching for something that satisfies a number of characteristics. If you're familiar with the satisfiability problem in
Mhm.
computer science, there's been a lot of headway made.
Mhm.
And LLMs don't do this natively. They don't solve the satisfiability problem, partially because, it's a computationally inefficient thing to do,
Mhm.
but partially because it's not, you know, uh, it's easier in some ways to predict the next word, and people don't always use logic in their arguments, right? They use associations.
Right. Sure.
You argue by reference to authority,
Right.
and stuff like that, rather than um, putting together the logic. I've spent a lot of time working with
Mhm.
logical systems, and I see that as a fundamentally unbiased native way to put together facts. Right?
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, and there's all the logical fallacies, slippery slope
Hmm.
or straw man or, all of these things, and I think a large percentage of arguments, or supposed arguments are subject to those fallacies that people mount, but that is a fascinating way of using the LLM that I had never thought about to kind of take this unstructured data, put it into structure, and then even for reasoning, use this once it's structured in a way that the reasoning algorithm can understand, then you probably get in some senses a lot better reasoning. 'Cause I think we've all seen LLMs make really ridiculous reasoning mistakes all the time, and it'll say, "Oh, we're gonna do this because of X," and then you follow up and you're like, "Well, that doesn't really follow from X," and it's like, "Oh, yeah, you're right, it doesn't follow at all." And it's
Yeah.
like, whereas if you have something like Prolog or something like that, that's not gonna happen.
No, it can't make those kinds of mistakes. It also can't generalize and just suck in information and mount something without somebody spending a lot of time on it. So the generalization of LLMs is amazing, but the ability to be accurate, the um, the logical groundedness isn't there. I mean, fundamentally, they're thinking the same way people think, which is messy.
Right.
Uh, I mean, it's not really exactly the same way people think, but it is messy like us. And
Mhm.
English, right? We talked before about how There are ambiguous languages and unambiguous languages. Constructing an argument in the language of English arguments
Right.
fundamentally does not have the guarantees
Right.
that we get from logic.
And I just,
Amazing.
it might feel like we're talking about something like super cool part of AI you've never heard about, but it's in a lot of ways analogous to writing code.
Mhm.
So I mean, you're like why even bother writing any code? Like whatever you're writing the code to do, why doesn't the LLM just produce, or if it's a multimodal model, why doesn't it just produce that for you directly? Well, the reason is that um, you want to do something in a complex enough way, and you maybe care about certain guarantees or reliability,
Mhm.
and then you want to, and if you can put it into this code language and then run it through a compiler, well, it's kind of, I'm curious what you think about this, but in some ways, it's kind of the same. It's just that instead of a compiler, you have these specialized like reasoning algorithms,
Mhm.
or inference algorithms, and a different kind of inference, not neural network inference.
Mm.
Um, but then, and also there's a language. And so what's amazing is like, I used to write these by hand,
Mm.
and oh my God, it was kind of like a painstaking, it was like extra hard programming. And the thing about answer set programming in general that I've heard, so it basically all comes down to a super optimized SAT solver. So SAT is this famous computational problem if you look at computational, like P equals
That's the same
NP.
as the satisfiability I referenced earlier,
Yes, yeah, same
in
thing,
case
same
anybody
thing.
is
Yeah.
confused.
SAT. So there's been this ongoing work how to make more and more efficient SAT solving,
Mhm.
because so many NP hard problems
Mhm.
can be translated into a satisfiability problem. And then if you can translate it, then you can run it on this highly optimized SAT solver to get the answer out.
Right. So an example of this that I ran into, I was working on, I work on key management systems, and I think about recovery flows
Like keys for like the door.
for yeah, like getting your house. No, like, let's say protecting your Bitcoin or protecting your AI data, encryption keys. And you
Or
have
SSH keys.
or yeah, whatever cryptographic key that's like high value that you need to distribute it where you have like 2 of 3 can move funds or authorize an action. And I had this really hard problem where I wanted to have the system be robust to all of these different scenarios, like loss, theft, seizure, like every possible thing that can happen, um, which is really hard to kind of hit that bar. And so I had this set of I think there was like 8 authentication factors, like there was like phone, hardware wallet, like a pin-based key, there's like all these different keys. There's like 8 different factors, and, I wanted to create these sets where, you could always lose 2 and still spend. And then I had other conditions where it was like, there should never be mobile-only factors and, like, all of this different stuff. And I wanted to search through the entire space, and it was like the power set of 8 or so it was like some insanely huge number to brute force all the different ways of combining the factors into these sets, and then analyzing all the sets if they collected them according to my rules and all of this stuff. And then that's when I realized, discovered, I had never heard about SAT solvers I was doing this research, it's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, there's these SAT solvers, and you can encode the problem in this language, and they can actually, like, search through this space that you could never get through with a brute force." But they could search through this giant space, and I did that. I used there was, like, a Google one, CP-SAT or something like that. Um
I'm curious, was there many answers, or was there kind of one
No,
answer?
that was what was crazy. It came up with, like, out of this huge, giant space, there was, like, 5 different configurations that actually satisfied the
That's
conditions,
wild. That's
and it
wild.
felt like,
Talk
oh,
about finding a gem or needle in the
that's what
haystack.
it felt
Yeah.
like. It was like, "This is the golden one," and it was like, no wonder it's so hard. I'm on the whiteboard trying to think through, like, "What if
Mhm.
we did this, and what if we did that?" And I had no idea how doomed I was
Right.
trying to do it that way because the space was so big, and I was never gonna find this, like, needle in the haystack. But anyway, that's, like, just a whole long detour just to provide an example of the power of a sat solver that you can like
Yeah.
search through this enormous space
And
that
you get strong guarantees or perfect guarantees almost for your
exactly.
problem.
Yeah, which is hugely powerful. Um,
Well, guys, should
yeah.
we kind of wrap up a little bit? We've been talking a little while, and uh, any kind of it's been a pleasure having you here, Matt, and talking about all this stuff. I guess anything you guys want to?
Well, this has really got me thinking about using LLMs in this way of kind of combining them with these other types of reasoning systems. I think that's super fascinating. I think that also could be really important from a tokenomics perspective, where, who knows how expensive tokens are going to get one day. And if you can not use the LLM for every single thing that's happening in the system and kind of have a more targeted use, that could be interesting. But
It's often much more efficient as well, at least in the sense of, taking less computational power to come up with an answer. It doesn't necessarily, uh, it might require you to spend more development effort to get
mm,
working than an
mhm.
LLM. But for that, you generally get back some benefits in not needing so many GPUs to get stuff done.
So good for the environment. You're worried about water usage, use Prolog or something like that. But yeah, no,
It's a
it's
good
absolutely
campaign.
fascinating. I'm going to be thinking about this. I really appreciate your insights about it.
Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you. This has been fun, guys.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, till next time, please like and subscribe and leave us a comment. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah. See you next time.